Welcome to the Business of Indie Games 2018. My name is Simon Bailey, and I'm here with Dom Matthews, the Commercial Director of Ninja Theory, the mid-size indie studio behind HELLBLADE, a runaway success of 2017, winning Best Indie at the Global Game Awards. Dom was the architect behind the unique strategy for HELLBLADE. They raised their money privately without investment. They didn't use a publisher. They owned the license outright, and they focused exclusively on digital distribution. They managed to produce AAA quality on an indie budget thanks to a fantastic team. They sold 75,000 units before they launched, and they sold another 500,000 units in the first 3 months at an average price point of $27. An awesome achievement. Hi Dom, congratulations on well-deserved success, and thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here, and always happy to talk about HELLBLADE.
Here at the Business of Indie Games, we try to dive in and get a little bit deeper to help indies, reach the next level, to help indies, try to take on avoid as many mistakes as we've made, and try to, mimic our success as best as we've had it. So if I can ask, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and please, go as deep as you'd like to, and please, have in mind what we can give back to the indie community, as I know you already do over at Ninja Theory. So I'll jump straight in. You've talked about HELLBLADE's model being a new third way for indie studios, in the sense that you create and fund your own IP to AAA quality.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, that's the best mid-studio fight back I've ever seen. So well done.
Yeah.
How did you get to this position? Was HELLBLADE born out of necessity?
To an extent, yeah, I think it was. So if we go back 4 years now, or 5 years now, I suppose, we just finished DMC Devil May Cry, which was a great title, one that we loved working on with Capcom, and had gone very well. But after DMC, we came up with a concept for a new game, a game called Razor, which was a big AAA game, and we started to pitch it to traditional publishers. And through the course of doing that, we realized that the market for games had changed to one where there were really these two extreme ends of the market. One was indie games, and the other was these big AAA blockbusters. And at the AAA blockbuster end, games were so huge and so expensive to make that the types of games that can exist in that space really have to appeal to the widest possible audience. And that's really as a result of the fixed retail price of games, or AAA games, at $60. That $60 price point has been there for many years. Going all the way back to, certainly I remember buying SNES games, not many of them, but I remember buying SNES games for £60, here in the UK many years ago. Yeah. So developers and publishers haven't been able to compete on price, and instead have had to compete on the size and scale of their games and the feature set, to such an extent that kind of when we lifted our heads up after DMC and looked at the market, we realized that as a sort of a mid-sized independent AAA developer, we were kind of left with a choice of either going really big with our developments, ramping up the team to several hundred people from the sort of 80 people that we had at the time and still have, going really big, creating a game with so many features, with season passes, with multiplayer, with all the bells and whistles that are needed in that space. And frankly, I think having to sacrifice creativity and creative risk-taking to make something that could be forecast to sell the 5, 6, 7 million plus units that are needed in that space now. So we kind of looked at that and thought, well, that's one option. The other option is that we walk away from console development altogether. And actually, at that time, a lot of studios and a lot of publishers were doing that. They were mobile was hot at the time, so a lot of people were moving away from console development and looking purely at mobile, where there was revenue to be made. Or to disappear altogether, frankly, which is again is what has happened to a lot of talented teams and a lot of talented studios. So we were kind of faced with that very difficult choice, and it just didn't feel right for us. We didn't want to ramp up. We didn't want to walk away from console development. We certainly didn't want to disappear. So we kind of knew that there was an audience that wanted to play the games that we make. And we knew that those games are the games that we want to make, that we love making. So it was kind of a question of trying to find a way to structure the development of a game like that in a way that allowed us to make those games and deliver them to the people that want them. And that's really where the idea for independent AAA came from, which was, well, how do we break away from that fixed retail price of $60 and make something that can be shorter, can be smaller in scope, can take more creative risks, and that's where it led us to digital distribution, where we can have that flexible pricing. We can make a $30 game. There's no retailer that's going to say no, it has to be $60. We can make a $30 game. We can make it shorter. And because we kept our budget low, we could make it for a smaller audience. We don't have to try and sell it to everyone. We can be comfortable in saying that this isn't a game for everyone. This is for a smaller audience that love what we do. So actually, there was an element of necessity on that game, and that drove the innovation for the product and for the title. In every aspect. Starting off with that business model and sitting down and looking at it and saying, well, how can we make this work? And that's where HELLBLADE came from, first of all. We sort of came up with the commercial structure and the production structure before we came up with the game. We sort of gave ourselves the freedom, creative freedom, or gave ourselves this concept that we had faith in, and said, well, if we have this independence, we have the IP ownership, what do we do with that? What story do we tell? And that's where we came up with the concept for HELLBLADE.
Thank you. I mean, that's such a great description. You really took me into the world of those strategic decisions that you have to make when there's so much money at stake, and there's the sort of balance between commerciality and creativity. I don't think many developers could have done it. It must be your knowledge and skills, born over those years. And plus the sort of maturity of your technology that must have given you the ability to cut those corners and keep those budgets down.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. We had a lot of key partners on the project that wanted to help us develop the game in this structure, and no doubt our heritage and the Ninja Theory name has helped us to open doors. The HELLBLADE team, which was an average of 20 people over 3 years. A lot of people on that team were veterans of the industry, have worked in big AAA teams, worked in games for a long time. So, very talented people. But I'd say what was equally as important was the right attitude, and the attitude of quality won't be sacrificed, but we need to find innovative ways to deliver that quality within our budget. So the mindset and the attitude was incredibly important. And that really was a mindset of, let's question the way that we've always done things. So let's question the way that we've always done performance capture, and how can we do that under a smaller budget? Let's question how games are released. Because many people told us, well, you have to go physical. You can't just go digital. So when you start asking those questions and going, but why? Why do we have to do that? Actually, we don't want to do that. We want to go digital only. I think if you can have the faith and the confidence to ask those questions and take those risks, then you've got the potential to do something different in the market, and something disruptive, which is what we've ended up doing. So I think other developers can do it. And one of the one of the goals really with HELLBLADE was to try and create this model both for us here at Ninja Theory, but also for other developers that either find themselves in a similar situation to us here at Ninja Theory, or smaller teams who have had some success and want to kind of take the step up in production value. So, you know, the independent AAA model is very much about creating more diversity and creativity in AAA quality games. Yeah, that very high end creativity is squeezed because of those commercial pressures. So I think in an ideal world, HELLBLADE will be one of the first titles in this space, but there'll be many, many more to follow. You know, whether they be action games or racing games or rhythm action games or new genres that we haven't heard of yet, the types of genres that you see in the indie space that are being created all the time. Wouldn't it be fantastic if they could exist at the AAA quality level as well?
Yeah, I mean, that would be fabulous. You know, it's a real pleasure to make quality pieces of work, and to be able to do it, you know, independently and at your level of budget is that's nothing less than extraordinary. You know, having run a studio myself, I can see what you've done. It's brilliant. You know, I think that it's $50 to $100 million to produce a AAA title these days, to develop a AAA title.
Yeah, I think so.
And can you say what sort of ballpark what you spent? About 3 years on it, is that right?
Spent 3 years developing it, and you know, I think it's you know, it's a fraction of that. You know, we're not talking tiny budgets, but we're talking in the millions, obviously, but yeah, we're not talking about anything near that. You know, it's a fraction of what we've had previously for AAA games. You know, and making the game is one thing, but when you say 50 to 100 million to make a AAA game, that's only the making of the game, and then you have the marketing budgets to go on top of that. You know, you can add.
You can match it, can't you? That figure.
Yeah, exactly. So it was an all-round approach. This wasn't just about making a AAA quality game to a comparatively small budget. It was also about how do we publish this game to a AAA quality with a small budget as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I'd like to dive into that a little bit more in a bit. How did you actually fund it? Was it funded from royalties from your previous games, or a mixture?
Yeah, so a big chunk of it was money that we at Ninja Theory had saved up from previous projects. You know, so it was a risk on us, financial risk to put that money into it. Then a combination of kind of loans and grants, really. So one element we had was a grant from the Wellcome Trust, who are a global charitable foundation, and we had a co-production grant from the team there, which was £300,000. So that was great. So, you know, and I think when we looked at our funding, the important thing to us was that we had creative control and we retained the IP, right? Because we felt that if we could realize our creative vision to the fullest, then that's where we have the best chance of success. So all of the funding that we looked at was within that framework. And you know, it's great to see that actually that type of funding model now is becoming more and more common. You know, the concept of developers keeping their own IP was a completely foreign concept not that long ago. But yeah, now you're hearing more and more publishers and other funders talk about, no, of course we want you to keep the IP, which is a very, very different, or a very quite a large change of tone, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real breakthrough for all of us. You know, it's fabulous that you've kept the IP for this title, because now you still retain the creative control. Not only do you get the rewards of this one, but you get to dictate what happens with it next. You know, whether you can have sequels, if you take it in a different direction, and you're not challenged on any of that.
Yeah, and it's nice to have those There's commercial decisions as well as to what we do with the title. And I think what can happen with game IP is that you have one title, it performs, okay, or doesn't live up to the standards of the AAA blockbuster space, and then the IP, because it's retained by the publisher, it never sees the light of day again. And it's a shame. There's a lot of IP out there that could exist in this independent AAA space, but because it's tied up with publishers and they're not in this space, then a lot of the IP just won't be seen again.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember Sony telling me that they weren't going to see a return on Ratchet and Clank until after the third game. That's what it took to establish the new brand.
Yes, yeah, that's quite a common model, I think, is that franchise model of, we'll invest in games 1 and 2, and then maybe we'll make something on 3.
How did you manage to produce AAA quality without that budget? And we've got, looking at it from 4 different perspectives: production-wise,
yeah,
special effects, talent, and then, of course, marketing.
So let's start. I think splitting it into two key areas, really. One, development and publishing. So
yeah, great.
On the development side, sort of a very tangible example, I think, is what we did with performance capture, and this kind of encapsulates the attitude that we had. So we've worked with performance capture as a technology and as a technique for many years now, going back more than 10 years, where we sort of pioneered the use of performance capture in games on Heavenly Sword. So it's something that we believe enables the team to realize the truest character performance in game. So for us, we knew we wanted to use performance capture. Not only did we want to use performance capture, but we wanted to push performance capture in HELLBLADE. So that was something that we were committed to doing. It was a question of how do we do it, and the normal approach would be that we'd fly out to LA or fly out to New Zealand to spend 4 or 5 weeks shooting performance capture at great expense. But we simply couldn't afford that on HELLBLADE, so we had to come up with another solution. Part of our ethos here is that it's okay to fail. Fail often and fail fast. Because that allows you to take risks and to try new things. So we had some internal chats about, could we turn our boardroom, our biggest meeting room here, into a performance capture space? And we went back and forth trying to convince people internally, look, can we just give it a go? And in the end, we gave it a go. We bought some poles from IKEA, some wardrobe poles to put the cameras on. We reached out to Vicon, who provide performance capture kit, in particular cameras, and asked if they'd support us. We got some gym mats. We got some lighting from Amazon, and put together a DIY mocap space and gave it a go. And it worked out incredibly well. So we built that entire studio for what it would cost to go and shoot 2 or 3 days in a mocap, in a professional mocap studio. We built our own in-house mocap space that was done on a very small budget, but critically, it gave us the very highest quality data, as good data as we've ever had before, all from within our boardroom. So we did it on budget. We were achieving very high quality, and in addition, we had the flexibility of having our own in-house mocap studio, so we could go and shoot things in there whenever we wanted to.
That's amazing. Am I right in thinking, you're motion capturing the performance for the cutscenes, so you don't then have to hand animate, which is a very expensive process, and then you have to weigh that up against the motion capture costs, which means going to America and getting the data, but then also you have to then edit that data when you get it back, and that can be equally as expensive as the hand animation.
Yeah, so we capture facial animation, body, voice, and camera all simultaneously, and that's a that's a technique that we've used for a long time. And the reason we do all of that is because it essentially allows you to tell a story in a way that allows the player and the viewer to engage with that character without there being anything that takes you out of that story. And that's really the reason. The technology drives the creative, essentially.
Yeah. So it's a more real experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something you were doing even Heavily Sword, I seem to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've been doing it for a long time, but the big difference on HELLBLADE was how do we do this within the budget? And and maybe it wouldn't have worked out, and we would have had to find another solution. But because we had that attitude of taking the risk and giving it a go and seeing if it worked, that's how we ended up with an in-house mocap studio, and we wouldn't ever go back from that now because of the flexibility that it's offered us.
Yeah.
So in terms of development, that was one area. Building the environment.
Actually reduce the price by.
Yeah, building that mocap space cost us what it would cost for maybe 4 or 5 days of shooting at a professional mocap studio. So it's 4 or 5 days versus we've got a mocap space that we can use full time whenever we want. So it was an absolute fraction. So there's that, and then it's people in the team, I think, and it's people in the team having the right attitude of tasking them with, okay, we've got one environment artist. How do we realize the quality and the quantity that we need? And with our lead environment artist, Dan Atwell, who's an incredibly talented guy, his approach was, let's take a kit part based approach to creating the world. So rather than everything being bespoke, he created a small set of assets, so a handful of trees and rocks and other assets, and then using those in clever ways to create variation within the environment. So the actual asset creation time was reduced quite significantly, and then the work was on him to use these assets and other clever tools that he'd created to create the quality and the quantity of environment that we need.
So does that mean you didn't even need to outsource those? You just make new instances of them?
Yeah, we didn't outsource.
I mean, that's one of the first places to go to bring down budgets normally.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So on the quality, which means you want to keep it in-house, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And finding as well, tasking individuals and saying, okay, you're responsible for character art in this game, and we want 8 enemies, for example. How are we going to do this? And if you have the right attitude, then you can come up with left field and disruptive ways of achieving those things. And giving it a go. Another good example is we ended up using full motion video in the game to realize some of the characters other than the protagonist. Again, that was a thing where Tamim, the creative director, always had in his mind that he wanted to visualize those characters in some way, but we couldn't afford to realize them in the same way we realized the protagonist. So he said, well, why don't we try video and using that in the game as texture, and the use of live video in live action video in video games has got a pretty poor history. It never looks great. So it's one of those things where a lot of people in the team were, I'm not sure on this. It doesn't usually work, and it's not going to look great. But we tried it, and we tried it quickly, and we gave it a go. And as it turned out, it worked really, really nicely, and worked really well. Again, it was one of those things where it's like, well, we can't afford to visualize these characters in the same way that we have the protagonist. Let's try something else and see if it works. So I think that's the development side. It was like, I don't really like the phrase cutting corners, because that feels like we've done something on the cheap. It was being innovative so that actually what you see on screen, be able to tell. So the cutscenes, the cinematic scenes is a great example. Every single one of those cinematic scenes in that game was shot in our boardroom
I'm sure that you were worried about controversy, you know, when you released the game, because of the portrayal of psychosis in the lead character.
Yeah.
But actually, as I understand it, you've done all your homework and worked really well to get it across brilliantly.
Yeah, and that process started, not quite day one, but not shortly after day one. So yeah, the point at which we had created the concept of independent AAA and that commercial structure, we then sat down and said, well, if we have this freedom, what story do we tell? And that's where, to me, you had had this idea, or this vision for this story of a Celtic warrior's quest that was a fantasy game, essentially. A fantasy game like all of our other games, but in this case, it was a fantasy. It was the creation of her own mind. And we knew at that stage that this was a game where, it wouldn't get past the green light phase of most publishers because it would be too risky. But we've always held the belief here that games should be able to tackle any subject that film and literature and art can tackle. There's no reason why games can't do it just as well. So, it was an exciting opportunity to push those boundaries. But we knew if we were going to take on this story and this character and this journey, then we had to do our research, and we had to take that seriously. But it actually turned into something different. So what started out, I think, as let's do our research, let's understand this, let's make sure that we're delivering this in the right way, it actually turned into far more than that. So the people that we worked with actually fed into the creative directly. Wellcome Trust, a global charitable foundation that support projects that engage people in scientific themes. We started to work with them pretty early on. We're based in Cambridge, so we're lucky to have the university here. And I reached out to them fairly early on and said, look, we're making a game, and we'd love to talk to someone about psychosis, and so we can understand. And they put us in touch with a professor of neuroscience at university called Professor Paul Fletcher, who happens to live 5 minutes around the corner from our studio. Came in, and from the first time we met him, changed. I think, well, for me, certainly changed my perception on the entire world. Just from one sort of half an hour conversation with him. Paul from them was very, very enthusiastic about the potential for us to tell an incredible story through an interactive medium. So Paul was on the project very, very early on, helping us in the first instance to get an understanding of psychosis, and more than that, really how the mind works from a scientific perspective. And then that led on to talking to people who have lived experience of psychosis and mental health difficulties, people who hear voices, see visions, and have unique beliefs. So really throughout the project, we worked with a number of groups of people and other academics to get that understanding from them, but also to really share that development with them, and to lean on them for ideas, and that are in the game now. Some of those stories that we were told from people who live day in, day out with psychosis and with hearing voices, they're in the game. They had a direct impact on the game. So it was far more than, hey, we're going to make this game about psychosis and then let's show it to a bunch of people to check that we're not offending anyone. It was far, far deeper than that. It was a collaborative effort between us, the game developers, neuroscientists, and people who have lived with these experiences to try and make something special. And one of the moments throughout development that will stick with me forever was quite close to the end of the project, where we had everyone that we'd worked with come into our boardroom for the entire day to see the entire game from start to finish, and to sit there, play through the whole game so they could see the whole thing and see their reaction was incredibly touching. That gave us confidence, and that gave us a level of confidence that you know, what we were doing was right. You know, and throughout that course as well, we told the public that we were telling this story, and we tried to get across to everyone our best intentions and what we were trying to do. And we had a few people that were concerned, and we'd spoken to them and engaged with them and talked to them about what we were doing. And you know, with all of those people, actually, we turned them from people that were concerned actually into evangelists for what we were doing. So before the game was released, we had a level of confidence, but you know, we were still not sure as to how this was going to be received, because all the people that we've worked with, we'd had direct engagement with them. They had the context of what we were trying to do. But I think where there was a fear was that at a very high level, this was a video game that was telling the story of someone with mental health difficulties.
Did you receive any criticism at all?
Yes, I mean, we received criticism for the game. You know, the game didn't receive 10 out of 10 everywhere. We did very well critically, but we received some criticism, which is to be expected.
Shall we move into publishing?
Yeah.
Shall we take a look at that? I mean, you sold 75,000 units in pre-release.
Yeah.
Did you plan? I mean, was that on a PlayStation Network, or did you have a Steam version? Can you talk about the strategy?
Yeah, PlayStation and Steam. Those 20 people on that team, that included all of the publishing function, which was essentially just me, really. So digital,
and your valuable years at Capcom, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's a digital-only title, so it does make things a lot more straightforward. But actually, in all my career in games, I've always wondered about this sort of blueprint that there is for video game marketing and PR that everyone seems to follow. By and large, it seems to be the same approach, the same blueprint that everyone takes. And I've always wondered, why is it this way? Why is it always this way? And so I wanted to take it as an opportunity on this game to try things, to do things differently, not follow that model, not just do things because that's what everyone else does.
Yeah, thanks. Well, what did you do differently?
Now, most people announce their game, AAA game, maybe 6 to 12 months before release. Pretty small campaign window, as most people will call it, a campaign window where they can drip feed information, one thing a month or every couple of weeks, and ramp it up to a big crescendo at the end. But I remember seeing a TED talk that was about the marketing approach of companies like Honda and Apple that actually don't sell products, but they sell a belief. Honda sells the power of dreams. Do you believe in the power of dreams? Well, if you do, buy a Honda. Do you believe in innovation? And buy a Dyson. So I kind of wanted to take that feeling and that essence and build that into our marketing campaign, so that HELLBLADE was really more about not just the game, but it was about a belief that we had that independent, high-quality games can be made that take creative risks. There's also a commercial reality there that we didn't have a big marketing budget. We had a tiny marketing budget, so we had to look at that and say, well, how do we do this? So rather than announcing the game 6 months or 12 months before release, we announced it at the very, very, very beginning of development. As it turned out, it was 3 years before release. So we announced it at the very beginning. We had we showed a trailer at Gamescom, and we decided that we were going to give players an insight into how we make the game through blogs and through development diary videos. and take them on the development journey with us, with the very specific aim that people would feel like they're part of the team, that they're really on this journey with us. So we had a commitment from the beginning that we'll share the journey for good and bad and for everything in between. Started with that very first development diary back in August 2014. And that series ran for 30 episodes that finished just after the game was released. So you can genuinely go back over those 30 episodes and see that game come from nothing to launch and to commercial success. And that wasn't entirely the marketing campaign, but it was very core to it, because I wanted to engage players at a deeper level than just an ordinary trailer. I wanted people to feel part of that journey, and I believe in karma. Like, I believe that if we gave people something of value to them, an insight into what we're doing, then we get that love back. So it was kind of by the end of that 3-year journey, and everyone having followed us, and us turning around then at the end and saying, now you can buy the game. For a lot of people, it was a no-brainer, because they'd seen this thing evolve over time. And a good analogy that someone gave me was that it's like some restaurants now, some fancy restaurants have a chef's table where you sit in the kitchen and you see the craft and the skill that goes into the preparation of that meal, so that when you finally get that meal served to you, it tastes that much better because you've seen the craft that's gone into it. So that was really the idea for us as well, is that we wanted people to understand that the thought and the care and the love that goes into creating a game like this all the way. So what we ended up with throughout that process was not just people that were interested in buying the game, but people that wanted to support what we were doing, people that wanted to evangelize what we were doing to their friends and to the community, and people that wanted to answer community questions on our behalf. We coupled that with a media spend, a marketing spend, but it was a very, very targeted and focused marketing spend on the people that we genuinely thought would be interested in our game.
And where did you spend that money? With YouTubers and stuff like that?
No, we didn't spend any money on influencers. Everything that influencers did was organic. We didn't pay any influencers. A chunk of it was on Facebook. We had got some really good value from Facebook, actually, predominantly because of that very detailed targeting that you can have on Facebook. So we didn't have many bucks to spend, but I wanted absolute bang for buck when we did spend one. So Facebook allows me to target an advert or a video at someone who likes games that are on the right platform and are in the right kind of space as this game. And I think often with marketing, people misinterpret big marketing as good marketing. Quite often you have people saying, well, why isn't our game on the side of a bus? Why isn't our game on the underground, on the big posters on the underground? Or why is it not on TV adverts? Whereas with digital marketing now, you can be so targeted, so focused, and say, actually, I think the people that are really going to like this game are people who also liked Uncharted. So I can go and I can not only make sure that those people see the game, but I can tailor the content for that audience as well. So I was delivering videos localized into Brazilian for players that we thought would specifically like the combat element of the game. So really breaking it down and segmenting the audience and trying to make our advertising feel like something that would naturally fit into their social timeline.
And was that data available to you from Facebook?
Yeah, And I became quite obsessive about it for a while. Trying to deliver that very high,
Yeah.
the very high bang for buck, or the very highest that we could. And and I wouldn't spend the money if I felt like it wasn't deriving good value from us. But it was a long process. We were helping to amplify our development diaries and other assets 2 years in advance of release. To get this game on people's radar and to get them interested. And you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to spend a huge amount of money. I think if you have the right assets, the right advertising material, and the right targeting, you don't have to spend huge amounts of money to get good value.
Thank you. I mean, that's really interesting and very thorough explanation. I mean, when you first started talking about it, I just thought that you must have thought about Kickstarter, and then just, I mean, could you not have got everybody to pay in advance, or was the development budget still, because it was AAA, just too high?
We considered Kickstarter, and we decided against it because the project was a risk. We didn't know if it was going to work, and we didn't want to burn our bridges with our fans. And it didn't feel right to do that when we knew that it was a risk. So the crowdfunding element we thought wasn't right, but actually part of the inspiration for our development diaries was Kickstarter. We thought we really liked that kind of regular updates for the players and that insight. That's really cool. So we thought, well, let's take that part, let's still do that, but let's forget the crowdfunding part. And I think I think something that we've done with HELLBLADE as well through our development diaries is we try to help educate the audience about what goes into making a game, the costs and the thought. And I think the more that we can collectively do that as a development community, the more the fans will understand when things don't work out, when a game slips, or when different decisions are taken. I think that will help everyone. And I think Kickstarter can at times give a skewed perception of how much it costs to make games. I think when people ask for $500,000 for a AAA game, it gives the wrong impression that that's how much a AAA game costs.
And what else was available to you? Did you use the early access Steam idea?
No, we didn't go with early access, again, because as a story-led, experience-focused game, the game was only going to be ready for people to play and experience when it was done. So all of those elements needed to be in there. So we didn't use early access. I mean, we published direct to Steam, we published direct to the PlayStation Store across all of their territories. But other than running pre-order campaigns, it was fairly regular releases.
What was your execution strategy on Steam?
We were new to PC publishing. I think something that we wanted to make sure that we got right on Steam was that the game was going to be solid across all different configurations of hardware. I think that's one of the big challenges, sort of, as traditionally working more on console and coming to PC, is you don't know what hardware people have got and how they're configuring all of these things. So that was important. And something else that I suppose is across Steam and across PlayStation as well is, I really wanted us to localize the game into a lot of languages. Again, back to this idea of, if you give people some love, then maybe you'll get that love back. So we localized it was 20 languages in total, including English. So we localized into Turkish, Polish, Dutch, simplified Chinese, Portuguese, Brazilian, you name it. We Finnish, Norwegian, we localized into nearly every language, which again, I think particularly on Steam, you can see that we've done some really nice numbers in some of those smaller territories. But I think part of that is down to the fact that we showed we cared by localizing the game into that language. Localization is an interesting one. Like, I quite often get asked about what languages would you recommend localizing into, and I always say do as many as you can. And if you HELLBLADE had a lot of text, a lot of words in it, a lot of script that we had to localize. If your game doesn't have that much text in it, I would consider quite wide localization, because it's not that expensive, and it can make all the difference to someone in that territory as to whether they buy it or not. Russia is a good example. Russia, really, if you can localize into Russian, then you've got a far better chance of hitting good numbers in that territory.
Yeah, sure. I mean, did you localize the audio as well, or just the text?
No, we didn't. We just did subtitles, and a big part of that really was that the performance was so important. Trying to dub audio over the top of that would be very, very difficult. And actually, quite early on in the project, we did kind of a very unscientific poll of our users to say what sort of our Twitter followers and Facebook followers would like in terms of localization. And actually, a lot of the response was, we don't want it to be dubbed. We want there to be an option for subtitles to help as a safety net. If I miss something, I've got it there to fall back on. Much like with anime, where a lot of people who are into anime, they want it to be the original Japanese voice, but they have the subtitles there so they know what's going on. So, that's the direction that we went, and people seem very happy with that.
In addition to localization, is there anything you could recommend to indies releasing on Steam? What they could do to improve their discoverability? Yeah,
I mean, pick your release date. Don't just release on the day that your game's ready. Think about what day of the week it is, what else is coming out on that day. There's so many titles being released on Steam. Take the time to have a look around, list of what games are coming out, what games you're going to be up against on that day, and pick your day carefully. If a big game is coming out on that day, the store is going to be dominated by that. If a small game similar to yours is coming out on that day, just avoid it. So pick your day, very, very carefully. And I think take the time to get your store page right. Make it a visual place and a exciting, enticing place to be. There's a whole bunch of different categories on there that you can fill out reviews and awards and features sections. Take the time to get that right, to get your art assets right, your screenshots for trailers. Think about what it's like for someone landing on that page for the very first time. What's going to make them want to engage in your game? And I think now, in the sort of day and age we're in now, you've got a very short window to capture someone's attention. So what is it? Make sure your first image or your first trailer is something that's going to interest people very, very quickly. Was there a reason that you chose PS4 as a lead console over Xbox? Yeah, I mean we've got some heritage there with PlayStation, going all the way back to Heavenly Sword. EMC really is traditionally a PlayStation IP as well. So we've always had quite a close relationship with the team at PlayStation, and they were a great partner to help make this game a success. And the team there were incredibly supportive, and were very enthusiastic about HELLBLADE and what we were trying to do. I think PlayStation have done a very good job of being seen as the destination for very creative, independent projects. So it was a natural fit for them, and a great fit for us. Yeah. Did they put marketing spend behind it for you? I mean, PlayStation have got their own channels, their YouTube channel, the PlayStation blog, the PlayStation store itself, emails. There's many things they can do to help you. And one thing I would say for other developers is speak to PlayStation, pitch ideas at them, tell them you want to have a PlayStation blog post about this thing. It's not going to fall in your lap. You have to be proactive and work for those things. And if you can, it's a great audience. They have a captive audience. PlayStation players trust PlayStation and they listen to what they tell them. So, you know, they can make a big difference to whether your games are successful or not.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a great little piece of insight there to, you know, to actively approach Sony to get your blog posts up there. Did you have your links to your developer diaries up there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you have to understand with all of these things, with I think everything in business really, what is it that they're looking for? What is it that they're trying to achieve? And how can you make what you offer fit into that? Yeah. So they have an audience. They want to tell their audience about cool and interesting things that are coming to PlayStation. So you have to go to them, pick your moment. You know, we're going to announce this game, or we're going to announce some DLC. You know, something really interesting. What can you offer them that's different and exciting for their audience? The same goes for press as well. You know, the same goes for the press. And you have to think about it from their perspective. What are they trying to get out of it?
Was the press important to you? Who did you talk to?
Yeah, the press were important to us, but we took a different approach. We did take a different approach with the press. This is, again, quite similar to marketing for me. Let's try and get this game to people and in front of people that are genuinely interested in it and are interested in what we've been doing. That's outside of the standard, how long is it, how many weapons does the character have, all of these sort of typical questions. And people that were interested in the independent AAA side of things or the mental health angle, and work with them, you know, and think about what's interesting to that press, and not just jumping on every opportunity as well. You know, the game wasn't shown at every event. We turned down a lot of opportunities to be at the big events because we didn't feel like it was the right move for the game. We could have had the game on demo pods at E3, but we decided against it because it's a story and an experience. It's not something you can get in 10 minutes. So we turned down those opportunities. So, you know, we did do things differently, but I think it's very easy as a developer to, when you get offered a chance to do something, to go, we have to do this, we have to take this opportunity. But again, on HELLBLADE, we took time to sit back and go, is this the right thing for the game? Yes, it might be something where we're going to get a lot of people to see it, but is it actually going to do us any good in the long run? You know, so it's the same with the press, you know, and we actually put more effort into, not more effort, sorry, but we had a very distinct focus on speaking to the mainstream press and the consumer press, the newspapers and the science press about what we were doing, because we felt there was what we were doing thematically was interesting for that audience, and it was exciting for us to be talking to new scientists and The Economist and The Guardian and these organizations about what we're doing with games.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really interesting approach, actually, and one afforded by that subject matter that you've chosen, yeah. Which once again, you know, just highlights, like, not all of the best ideas have already been had. There is room for new creativity, you know, as much as we'll be told to make it in this format, make it in this way, has to be this, has to be that to sell X units. It's not the case. It's still a blue sky out there.
Yeah, I mean, and you only have to look at the indie space in gaming at the moment to see that there's genres being created all the time. You know, I always use Goat Simulator as an example, but if Goat Simulator was taken through a green light process with a publisher, I doubt they'd even get the meeting.
Yeah.
Now they would. You know, PUBG, what's happening with PUBG at the moment? Yeah. There's many things on paper where you go, I understand why this is a really big game, but also it's a premium multiplayer title where there needs to be 100 players in one game. You know, again, that doesn't fit the blueprint and the model and the forecasts. It does something different and disruptive. And now, of course, everyone's jumping on okay, Battle Royale is the next big thing. How do we get in on this?
Yeah, I can't get my son off of Fortnite, you know?
Yeah, so there's so many opportunities to do things differently. Another great example, you know, incredibly talented team based here in Cambridge, Ghost Town Games, that made Overcooked. For a few years now, people have been saying couch co-op is dead. No one wants couch co-op, everything's online. And that team said, well, guess what? We're going to make a couch co-op game. And it was huge. massive success. You know, because actually, yeah, maybe there's not 5 million people that want couch co-op, but actually, as it turns out, maybe there's 1 million. And you know what? If you keep your budget low, that's a massive success. They've gone on to win BAFTAs. Very, very successful team now.
Absolutely, and you've got a kind of a free run at it as well if you're the only person, you know, making for that genre.
Yeah, so I have a tendency now, maybe too much, but when someone says to me, you know, it has to be this or it has to be that, I have a tendency now to really question that and say, but why? You know, for example, and this always happens in game publishing, your trailer should be no more than 2 minutes long. But why? If you've got a really cool idea for a 5-minute long trailer, why not? And I think that's one of the challenges now, or the biggest challenges for game developers and publishers is how do you stand out? How do you get that visibility? And you look back at our very first trailer for HELLBLADE, we saw everyone else's trailer being about the explosions and the action and the big Hollywood set pieces. And we distinctly made a trailer that was slow, character focused, almost lingering in shots for too long, with a distinct lack of bangs and whizzes. And it made that trailer stand out. It was a serene piece, and it made people go, "Oh, this feels very different," and it made it stand out.
Yeah, sure. Oh, and I've seen the trailer on the, you know, the developer diaries, and you know, one of them, episode 25, which I watched, had nearly 500,000 viewers. So clearly, the developer diary was such an important part of growing the community for you. How long did it take to get traction on there? How many people did you start off with, and how did it grow? Was it all based around that trailer?
Yeah, so we announced it on stage with PlayStation at Gamescom back in 2014, and we got a lot of visibility then. You know, partly because we're Ninja Theory and because it was PlayStation. You know, HELLBLADE was trending on Twitter on that day, which was fantastic. Yeah, and then we started on the development diaries, and on those first ones, I mean, you can go and look at it now, and we had pretty small numbers, but it grew over time. Over time, as more and more people saw these, and it started off with a reasonably small core, and grew out from there and got bigger and bigger as we went on. And that was kind of our aim, was like, if we can grow this each time we release a development diary or write a blog post, then that's good. That's what we want. You know, that's good enough for us, is if we can just keep these things growing.
And were the diaries expensive to make themselves?
No, I mean, in-house video editor who is also the actor that played Senua
to be the main star.
Yeah. So in-house video editor, and really trying to make those development diary videos fall out of development. So what we were doing at the time, we documented it. We shot pieces to camera with Tamim, our creative director, with a handful of other people, and we just worked it into development. So in actual kind of above the line cost, they're very little. You know, I made all the slates in those, you know, with my rudimentary Photoshop skills. Because we didn't outsource that to agencies. We didn't get external video production houses in to do those things. We said we need to do it ourselves to have flexibility, but we need them to be high quality. So it does take talent, skill, but not a lot of cost.
Would you recommend other developers did developer diaries, and what pitfalls should they avoid?
So yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of development diaries out there. I would say that it's been a great thing for us, but it's been great for us because there was a story there that we were telling. It wasn't just, this is how we make a character. It was, this is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve something different. How do we make this? How do we do that in a context of that overall journey? I remember someone who works within TV said to me, most things on TV are about jeopardy. There's an element of jeopardy somewhere, and that's what people find engaging. And that's what we had in the HELLBLADE development diaries. There was an element of jeopardy, real jeopardy there. Was this going to work? That was true and genuine. So I would say to other developers, yes, development diaries have been great for us, but I would not do it, and so many people have, if you don't have a strong story or an angle to build around it. If you're literally just saying, this is how we made the game, I don't think that is enough.
Yeah, great, thank you. So just in the same way as you need a compelling idea for the game, you also need a compelling context for the diary too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that creativity, you now have this wonderful license and you own the IP. And you touched earlier on, you know, that you have commercial control over that license. Is there stuff you can talk about that you're doing? Do you have any innovations in that area about how you're going to exploit the license?
So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. HELLBLADE's been critical and commercial success for us, and you know, we're excited about what we can do with it next. You know, there's nothing that we're kind of talking about just yet. I mean, to me, the creative director has been taking some time out, you know, after sort of working on that project non-stop for 3 years. And at the moment, really, my focus is on, you know, making sure that the game is seen by as many people as possible. You know, we're still thankfully picking up a whole bunch of awards, which is great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So we're, you know, I know that there's more people out there that haven't heard of HELLBLADE yet, and I'd love for them to hear about it.
And are you still selling it at a premium price? Do you have campaigns going, or what's your sort of sales strategy?
Yeah, so part of the reason for going digital only as well is because I want to preserve the price of the game. We priced the game at a level that we felt was fair to players and fair to us. You know, we felt like the right price, so we didn't build in a buffer for discounting. We built in a price that we thought was right for the game. And some people feel that it's too cheap.
Yeah, understood. I mean, do you feel any pressure on price from Sony and Steam as well? Like a lot of independent developers experience that.
I was determined to not rush into discounting the game, and we didn't do that. You know, we've been involved in some discounting for the game, but we are doing that step by step, cautiously and iteratively. And when we do it, we're doing it where we feel that there's going to be big impact. You know, not rushing into these things.
What are the next steps for Ninja Theory? Are you planning to continue developing your own independent AAA now and make a strategy of that? Will you still be doing some work for hire?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, HELLBLADE's obviously been a success as a product and as an IP, and that's great. But I think the model, the independent AAA model, has been a success as well. So, you know, we'll certainly be looking at HELLBLADE and also at the model as well, and seeing what else we can do with that as well. You know, whilst at the same time still working with partners that are doing interesting things and want to work with us to make things with their IP or on specific projects. So, you know, we're a team of 100 people here at Ninja Theory, and HELLBLADE was a team of 20 people. So, you know, it's a corner of the studio, and there's plenty of other things going on at the studio at the same time.
Well, you know, I wish you certainly all the best with this new approach, new strategy you've found. You're really opening up the grounds for you know, other small studios and mid-sized studios to believe again that they're in with a shout, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
So if a small to medium-sized studio could take away 3 things from your experience and learnings at Ninja Theory in the development of and publishing of HELLBLADE, what would you say? What would you give?
Don't ever think that something is the reserve of the big AAA studios. Performance capture being a good example. And this is why partners wanted to work with us, because there seems to be this perception that performance capture is just for James Cameron. You know, and we've proved out that it doesn't have to be. You know, it can be for smaller teams as well. So if there's something that you want to do, whether it be performance capture or licensing music from a big band or whatever it may be, ask people, have those conversations, because you'll be surprised at how supportive people can be. And people are excited about video games; they want to get involved. You know, so yeah. Don't ever think, don't ever not take that step and try and make it happen. You know, my ethos is always start with your wish list and try and make that happen, and only move on from that when it can't work. So I take that, like I sort of talked about a lot earlier. You know, take the opportunity to question the way things have always been done. Don't just do things because that's what someone else did. You know, don't just do development diaries because that's what we did on HELLBLADE. Take, you know, if you like what we did, take the essence of it, which was engaging players at a deeper level. How do you do that? And that could be in so many different ways. So question the way things have always been done. Third thing I would say, you know, and I would say this as a commercial director and someone involved in publishing, put the effort and the work and the love into the publishing side of things as much as you do into the game, because you will suffer if you don't take care in the art, screenshots, the text descriptions, the localization. You know, try and find the time to, or build it into your development plans to do those things really, really well. You know, talk to the platforms about what you're doing, show them your game, because making a great game doesn't guarantee you success. You could have the best game in the world, but if no one knows about it, it's not going to work. So you know, take those things seriously, and you know, if you don't have the experience and the expertise yourself, talk to other developers. This is such a great community of independent developers. Reach out to people, reach out to me, you know, and ask about how we did our Facebook marketing. Well, there's lots of great small companies now that are handling indie PR and indie marketing. Talk to those people, see what they can do for you, and you'll be surprised at how little you need to spend, you know, to make these things.
Who do you recommend in that area, if you do?
You can have lots of great conversations with lots of different companies now. You know, I love being part of the independent development community, and it's great to be able to say that. You know, having for years worked on sort of publish your own titles. You know, I love going to events and talking to, you know, Mike Bithell, you know, and having similar discussions about discounting, about marketing, about influencers and these things, and having those shared challenges. So I think there's lots of great companies out there that you can just get on Skype with. You know, we've got the great technology now that you can just have conversations, and I've had hundreds of conversations through the course of HELLBLADE with people that we haven't ended up working with, but I've had little bits of information and advice and thoughts and ideas that have come from all over the place. So you know, that's almost a fourth thing, but networking, talking to people, you know, it's that's incredibly valuable too.
Thank you. You've come up with a fourth there. Any more?
Let's stick with 4. I think that's
fantastic. And then I think my final question: if you're a new indie starting out, do you have 3 things or 4 things that you could share that might help them to have an awesome career in games?
Find out what you really care about and focus on that. Know who you're making your game for. I think quite often people say, my game's for everyone. And that doesn't work. You can, you know, going back to Ghost Town Games and Overcooked, they're games for people who love couch co-op. Now that might be a small group of people. If your budget is small enough, then that's a big group of people. So I think understanding who your game is for, and why they're going to like it, and why it fits in that market for that audience, I think is really important. You know, why are those people going to be excited about it? And I think take the opportunity as being brand new to do things differently. You know, it's the same point really, but I look at Devolver Digital and what they're doing, and I love some of the things that they do. They just do things very, very differently. You know, the brand new indie, how do you make a name for yourself? Be disruptive. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. You know, be disruptive, do things differently. Get out there and make a name for yourself. Yeah. I think just following the path that others have followed, and even if it's been a successful path, it doesn't mean that it's the right path for you. Me too isn't enough. And when someone says to you, hey, make your trailer 2 minutes long and make sure that it's got an action sequence in it, a cinematic sequence and press quotes in it, really question why that would be and what would happen if I didn't do that and I made a 6-minute trailer that had no press quotes in it and no action. You know. Yeah, I think, and yeah, and the fourth thing as well is, you know, I get out and about to quite a few industry events and do talks about HELLBLADE and things, and you get to meet a lot of really interesting people. So if you're a small indie getting started, going out on your own, get out there, get to events, get to develop down in Brighton, get some business cards and get meeting people, because you'll be amazed at how many big things happen in this industry based on a chance conversation.
Absolutely.
Or a chance introduction. You hear it all the time.
I had a 10-minute conversation at an old show. Do you remember ECTS?
Yeah.
With Wanadu. 3 weeks later, they gave me 1.6 million euros to make an original title.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't think anything was going to happen, you know.
No, and the industry is like that. It's sliding doors. You just don't know. You know, when we look back at things, and I'm sure a lot of people in the industry and go, well, how did that come about? And it's the smallest of things, you know. If I wasn't at that event, or if I hadn't have gone to that dinner, or if I'd said, you know, I can't be bothered to go out to those drinks, maybe things could be completely different. You know, if I hadn't have picked up PR Week magazine all those years ago and seen an advert for a PR manager job at Capcom with a picture of Leon from Resident Evil 4 in it, I probably wouldn't be in this industry. But I saw that, and on the very last day that I could get my application in, I got my application in. I didn't think I had a chance in hell of getting the job. I got an interview and I thought, this is amazing. I'm going to get to go to the Capcom offices for an interview. I'm going to get to see what it's like. And then, you know, I got the job.
Yeah.
You know,
and look where that's led, you know.
Exactly. You know, we're very, very privileged and lucky to be working in the video games industry. Yeah, very, very lucky to do that. But it's based on the smallest chance meetings and conversations and introductions. So make yourself available for those chance conversations and opportunities.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's just so helpful. Dom, it's absolutely been fascinating for me, and I know it will be for our audience. I really appreciate you taking the time out, you know, to share these details that make such a difference to the independents.
That's my pleasure. My pleasure, absolutely. You know, what I say is genuine. What we've achieved on HELLBLADE, we hope other people can achieve it too, because there'll be more developers making the games that they love, more and players getting to play so many different types of games.